It has been quite a few years since I've had the privilege of preaching to 138 people. That was kind of fun. I'd like for us to do that more often. All right. Going to start off with a question tonight. Now, this is one of those things where don't blurt out the answer. Okay? There's a reason for this. Don't blurt out the answer. If you think you know the answer, raise your hand. That's it. Just raise your hand. Okay? Don't tell anybody else. Just raise your hand. First of all, what does a lion and a spider have in common? Do you think you know? Okay, we got one thinks he knows. What does a male goat or ram have in common with a grasshopper? Okay, if you think they're all God's creation, wrong answer. That is, well, I'll say that. That's the right answer, but that's not the answer I'm looking for. The answer is they're all found in Proverbs chapter 30. So that's where I want you to go tonight. We're going to be looking at lessons from the small creatures. Even the smallest of creation has lessons for us. Now, I did have to slip in one. I did slip in the line. I'll talk about that because this is an interesting evaluation of the lion. So turn to Psalm 30, verses 24 through 28. I don't mean Psalm, that should be Proverbs. Proverbs 30, 24 through 28. There are four things which are little on the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their food in the summer. The rock badgers are feeble folk, yet they make their homes in the crags. The locusts have no king, yet they all advance in ranks. The spider skillfully grasps with his hands, and it is in kings' palaces. Now, look at the next three. This is just an addenda. There are three things which are majestic in pace in the way that they walk. Yes, four which are stately. A lion which is mighty among beasts and does not turn away from any. A greyhound, a male goat also, and a king whose troops are with him. If you have been foolish and exalted yourself, if you have devised evil, put your hand on your mouth. Now, the first creature we're going to talk about is not a small creature, but I want to throw this in because I really like this. First of all, he said, look at the lion. Look at the lion. Majestic, ferocious, top of the food chain, exalted above all the animals, used often as symbolism of courage and strength, determination. In his walk, he has a walk of nobility, a walk of power, a majestic pride. Now, Proverbs, the wise man says, now, if you think that you are exalted, if you think if you kind of exalt yourself and have any pride whatsoever, if you think that you are so great and so awesome, consider the lion. and then put your hand over your mouth. Because compared to the lion, you're nothing. For example, if you're walking down a trail in some jungle somewhere, and all of a sudden you see a lion, who is going to get out of whose way? The lion gets his way. We give him the lion's way. Now, so Solomon tells us, don't be self-important. Compare yourself to the lion, and then be humble. Think about the creation of the lion for the purposes that it was created, and then our own purpose. Again, we, unlike the lion, is in the image of God, which we have been given a greater purpose. He also goes ahead and talks about the greyhound and the ram or the male goat. You know, I was in Wyoming several years ago on a campaign, and I happened to see one of these rams on a precipice, kind of jumping from one place to another, and it was awesome to watch. You can see that pride and that agility in that animal. That's some of the greater animals of creation that we have listed. But now we have these four little fellas that we want to talk about. First of all, we're going to look at, well, I want to talk about this for just a second. God's marvelous creation. You know, scientists have come up with a lot of marvels in their time. I mean, penicillin, the vehicle, industrial machines, flying to the moon. We've come up with some pretty neat stuff. But I want you to think about the things that God has created. We can't touch it with creation. You know, they've just now discovered DNA, but there's no way they can repeat what was created by God. Nothing, something. According to science, you know that little bee? He's not supposed to fly, but nobody's told the bee that yet. So he flies. A marvel of creation. So small, yet his body structure compared to his wings is too great. Those things that seem to be insignificant have great value. You know, a lot of times we get to get a little depressed. Maybe we feel like we're insignificant. Maybe we feel unloved. Maybe sometimes we feel like we're just missing something in our lives. You ever felt that way? We must always remember that we, in God's sight, is not insignificant. As we said so many times, here we've been created in His image. He sent His Son to die for us. If that doesn't prove our significance in the sight of God, what does? Now I'll tell you, the other side of this quotient is, if God loves me and is concerned about me and cares for me, then it really doesn't matter how the world feels about me. In fact, Jesus said the world's going to hate you. So what? They hated Christ before me. They hated the apostles. They put them to death. They put Jesus to death. So, my significance doesn't come from the worldly view. It doesn't come from the things. My significance comes from our relationship with God. And until we realize that, we're not going to cure our depression ills. So many lessons to learn from creation. And again, we're going to look at these four. The ant, rock badger, locust, and spider. In fact, I want to go to the ant last. I've got quite a bit of material on him. He's an interesting character. Let's go to, let's see, the rock badger. Now, we really don't know for sure what this fella is. Some call him an Arabian mouse. Some have called him a lizard. So you get all kinds of translations. The one that I like the best is a rock badger, okay? He lives in the crags. Now, what kind of lesson can we learn from that? First of all, we learn that this little fella is smart enough to know where not to go. He knows if he leaves those rocks too far, then he is food for the prey. And the predator will come. It may come from the sky or the ground. If he is not near the rocks and can't get back, he becomes food for a predator. Therefore, they don't travel too far away from the rocks, knowing that. You know, a few years ago, we had a hawk in the tree right here behind our house. Had some little hawks. What do you ever call a baby hawk? We call him a hawkie. He had a couple of hawkies in there. And my neighbor had some chickens. Hawks and chickens don't get along too well. Especially with that hawk has little hawkies up there with him. So he had to build a special pen to keep those chickens in there. That pen with a top on it, keep that hawk out. Raccoons would get in there. You know, these predators, they're just looking for a chance to take the prey and to dine. Now, what does it mean to us? Okay? There are predators among us. Those that are sinfully, those that are worldly, those that are contrary against God. And so it behooves us not to travel too far out of the realm of God. We need to stay close by. You see, it's important that our relationship with God remains strong and that we stay in His safety net. Turn with me, if you would, to Psalm 18 and verse 2. Psalm 18 and verse 2. I want to look at a few passages, especially Psalm 40 in just a minute, but Psalm 18 verse 2 first. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. You see, the psalmist understood that his protection from the world and from the evil and from those that would do him evil is God, his rock, his fortress. He wouldn't move himself too far out of the reach of God, lest he becomes prey. You know, we already looked at the book of Peter when Peter says that Satan is a roaring lion, seeking whom he might devour. That's a metaphor for a pretty evil guy, a very ferocious. You see him stalking. He is a stalker. And he looks for those that have traveled far away from the safety of God. Turn to Psalm 40. One of the first sermons I ever preached. And by the way, April the 6th, this week, I will have been here 18 years. 18 years. I didn't know I'd lived that long, much less be here for 18 years. But I've enjoyed every minute of it. Psalm 40. I preached a sermon back there, as I mentioned, when I was just a very young preacher boy. And this passage has stayed with me. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me. He heard my cry. He brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, set my feet upon a rock, and established my steps. He has put a new song in my mouth, praise to our God. Many will see it in fear and will trust in the Lord. You see a fellow struggling in the mire of sin, in the clay of transgressions. And he's trying to get a good foothold in something solid, something stable, but it's not there. He can't find it. He cries for help. The Father lifts his hand down and pulls him up and sets him on a rock, on a bed of rock. That gives him now support, stability, protection. You see, there's where our protection is with God. But if you remember what I said from the very beginning, if you want to leave God at any time, you can. The only way the evil one is going to snatch us away from God is if we depart from him. When people fall back into the sin world, when people fall back into the world that is totally contrary to God's will, that world is because he walked away. He got too far from God's safety. And he's been snatched out of the hand by the evil one. Now, all this is a metaphor. It doesn't really work that way literally, but it does work that way. In fact, let me ask you a question. Think about this for a moment. How many people do you know that used to be here in this building when the doors were open and are not here now? You know anybody like that? Why do you think Paul said, take heed where you stand lest you fall? Why do you think he said, I buffet my body daily, that's what I preach to others. I myself be a castaway. We have to consider ourselves. And like this little animal that's so smart and so wise, not depart from our God. Psalm 61:2. Psalm 61:2. From the end of the earth, I will cry to you. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a shelter unto me. The rock that is higher than I. The next little guy we want to look at is the locust, or what we call a grasshopper. How many of you have ever seen the damage that a multitude of grasshoppers can do to a field? Anybody? Yeah, most of us have. They can strip it. But you know, not just one of them. It's not just one that can strip a field. It takes a host of them. And if you don't think that they can completely destroy your life's work in just a couple of days, let's look at Pharaoh for a minute. Exodus 10, verse 15. In Exodus 10 and verse 15, it says that the sky was blackened with a number of locusts. And all the crops of Pharaoh and the Egyptians were devoured. All of their months of hard work and preparations now gone. Well, you say, well, that's kind of a negative thing. Not really. Because you see, here's what we're talking about. It's not just one. One is not going to do a whole lot of damage. 30 is not going to do a whole lot of damage. It takes a host, multitudes, working together to do the damage. Do you know why, I mentioned this morning, do you know why the church is still growing today? Somebody said, no, it's shrinking. I said, no, it's not. It's not shrinking. It's growing. In spirit. At least it should be. And I think it is. And probably in number too, if we were to check the numbers in the last few years, but that's unimportant. What is important is this: why is it increasing the way it's increased? Because of the work that's been done by the host of Christians since the time of Christ. Working together. Alone, I can't do as much as I can with a group. That's one thing the Bible teaches in a number of places. Why do you think God instituted the church? Because He's doing away with this oneness concept, this individualistic ideology that sometimes we come up with. It takes the church working as a whole. One efficient group working together. I heard of something called synergy, and I'm not even sure I know what it is. I know the math made no sense to me when I first heard of it. 1 + 1 + 1 = 4. Now that's supposed to be synergy. Basically what it means is we are doing the work for more people than really what we have. That's my take of it. That's the church. We are given responsibility from God to carry the truth in all the world. But there's just a handful of us compared to the rest of the world. But working together, that's where the power comes from. Have you ever got into a situation where you're playing tug of war and there are 6 on one side and you're by yourself on the other? What's going to happen? You're going to get drugged through the mud because you're by yourself. You go out there and get you some big old boys. Find you some guys that have some strength and backbone, can lock themselves down. You find them. Then you go out there. Then you take them on. Well, let me tell you something. We are involved in the greatest fight of our lives against the world. And I can't defeat Satan by myself. I have God. There's my equalizer there. But then God has given me you to support me. In the fire service, you have a big line, and this big line carries a lot of water and it has a lot of pressure behind it. One fellow trying to hold that line is going to either end up on the ground or in the air, because one person can't hold that line by himself. I have personally been on that line. I know what it's like. I have been number one on that line. I had 3 guys behind me, basically supporting me, their knees in my back, keeping me from being taken down by that line. That's the only way we can control it. Now think about that. That's the way it is. We work together. The church is strong together, but it's only as strong as its weakest link. But the church works together in unison and in strength. Look at Genesis 11, verse 6. This is a passage that I think is interesting. What can happen to catch the attention of God? You ever thought about that? What gets God's attention? What can we do that's so out there that God says, wow? Well, in Genesis 11, we see one of those things. You have a people that wanted to build this tower for the heavens, trying to make a name for themselves. So they went to work on it. God, looking down from his throne, said, these people are what? One. One. Now let me spell that out for you. O-N-E. Nothing that they have planned to do can be held from them because they're one. Why do you think Paul told the Corinthians, let there be no divisions among you, but be joined together in the same mind, same judgment? Folks, if this church was really joined together in the same mind, same judgment, we'd be unstoppable. If the church itself, globally, was of one thought, one mind, what do you think could happen? The locust is proof what could happen. Ephesians 4, 15 and 16, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things unto him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body joined and knit together. I love that. Joined and knit together by what every joint supplies. Folks, that's you and that's me working together. It's not just the elders working, not just the deacons working, not just the elders and deacons working. It is the church working. Now look, the effective working by which every part does its share. The question is, am I doing my share? What is my share? Do you want the church to grow? Do your share. You know, we go back to the talents. Whatever that talent is, just do it. I'm not expected to do what I can't do, but I am expected to do what I can do. I will be judged. And when each joint, each bone, each fiber, each part of the body does its share, the church grows by the edifying itself up in love. The next little dude we want to look at is a spider. How many of you like spiders? I was watching a TV show the other night, and they don't bother me that much. But there was a tarantula crawling on a lady's leg. That bothered me a lot. I'm talking about a little spider. I saw a young man one time jump off in a lake because he got in a spider web with a spider in his clean clothes at a party. Some people are petrified when it comes to spiders. Okay, it's called arachnophobia, in case you're wondering. Again, this is one of those situations where they're not really sure what this creature is, so they think it's a spider, and so we're going to play like it is. Some believe that Solomon was talking about the web weaved by this little creature. Now, I want you to think about this. You can go into a house that has been dilapidated, that has been basically falling in on its own structure, and you see cobwebs. Well, you go into a king's palace or a $400,000 house in Dallas, Texas, and there are going to be places you're going to see a cobweb. You see, the spider builds his cobweb wherever he is. And you can't stop him unless you find him. Have you ever really looked at and studied a cobweb? I mean, actually looked at it under a magnifying glass or a scope. It's extremely complex and intricate. Like it was woven. That little dude can put together something that I don't think we could do. You know, that spider, it doesn't matter. It's found in the houses of poor or the rich. And in that, he tends to be one that is kind of sometimes hard to get rid of. So I see in the spider, this small guy, a persistency. And he leaves his mark. You know where he's been. And you know what he's doing. You know, that's the way we as Christians need to be. People need to know we've been there. And they need to know what it is we're doing. They need to understand what we're all about. That this intricate belief system that we have in God is so powerful and moving. It needs to leave its mark on humanity. Now, I want to, for just this is going to be my main point, but I don't have much time now, but I want to talk about the ant. There's a lot more said about the ant than these other things. And let's see here. Let me go back to the ant. There it is. All right. An ant is a very small creature. It's one of the smallest of the creatures. And yet he can be a nuisance, can he? How many of you have ever been stung by an ant? A bunch of ants. They hurt. But you know, they're real small, yet they can cause a lot of pain. Now, when you compare their size, they can lift 10 to 50 times their weight. That would be almost equivalent to me being able to lift 1,500 to 7,500 pounds. Yeah. Have you ever seen one with a morsel of food? I'm not talking about the cartoons where you see an ant carrying a cake. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really a morsel of food. That morsel of food, you can't see the ant for that morsel of food. He can lift that kind of weight. For his size, he is very strong. Now, with that in mind, he is always on the move. You can see trails that the ants make, and they're always preparing. They're preparing for the winter. They're taking supplies to the queen. They're always working, always moving. That's why in Proverbs 6, verse 6 through 8, the proverb writer there says, consider the ways of the ant, you sluggard. If you're lazy, you think about the ant. He's constantly working, constantly moving. You know, it's funny how sometimes we can be so energetic when it comes to jobs or recreation, but when it comes to our spiritual life, we get a little bit more relaxed. Why is it that way? You know, he has a little protective armor. Now, it doesn't really help him if we step on him, but for insects his size, it kind of works. But he's built in such a way that he is protected by this armor, and that armor also helps to give him strength. I don't know how big that is. I don't know why that's so small. They don't need anyone to push them to work. I say that, but in every mound there is what they call the soldier ant. Now the soldier ant, his purpose is to kill any ant that's not working. Because you see, if they're not working, they're not bringing the supplies in that they need. They're not taking care of the queen as they should. So the soldier ant will kill any of them that he finds not working. But there's also the honeypot ant. The honeypot ant is one that shares his food with others. Consider the ant. Not that they can be a nuisance, but the way they work. If we could work like that for the Lord's church, just think what we could accomplish. And they do this without supervision. Philippians 2, verse 12, therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. When an ant starts something, it finishes it. Philippians 1:6, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ. Once we start things, we need to finish it. Once we start our Christian walk, finish it. Don't get halfway through it like a lot of people and then give up. Throw up your hands in frustration and say, no more. Finish what you've started. As we talked about a moment ago, they prepare for the summer or the winter. We are preparing ourselves for the judgment. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you're going. Once we draw our last breath, it'll be too late. There's no more preparation. Ephesians 5:16, redeeming the time, for the days are evil. Now notice Solomon, the wise, looks at these four little insignificant creatures and shows how they are wise in their actions and encourages us to follow in their pattern, to follow in their footsteps, their little tiny footsteps. Some of us may be a spider, some of us may be locusts, some of us may be the rock badger or the ant, whichever. But whatever it is, glorify God by bearing fruits unto His name through the church, working together. Tonight I'd encourage you, Christian, is there anything any better than what God has given to us in the church? Is there anything any greater than what we have in the church? If you're not a part of that, I want to encourage you to consider what the church could mean to your life, to the love it brings, to the challenge, the edification, and in turn, that which you give back to the church. And in giving back to the church, you give back to God. So this evening, if you're not a Christian, we'd encourage you to consider your life, consider your circumstances, and make up your mind to become a Christian. Now, if you're a Christian, if we can help in any form, any fashion, any way in your life to be stronger, and you need the prayers, the invitation is yours. While we stand and sing together.